Greetings and salutations, my friends. Me and my emotional support water bottle are here to bring you my October wrap-up, which means that we'll be talking about every single book I read in the month of October, which is exciting. I've talked about this before, but every time I vlog, it's not every time that I start and finish a book in that video, and so there will be many a time where I start a book, made progress with it, don't necessarily finish it, or I read some of it, I've already started it, don't finish it, or I'll read the very tail end, and so you guys don't really get to see the entire array of emotions as I'm reading a book. And there are also some books that I simply do not vlog, and so wrap-ups are a really great opportunity to talk about every single thing I read in the past month or so, and I personally love them. I think it's a nice little video to pop in the background that I don't have to, I guess, like visually see. I can just hear it as if it was like a podcast, and I can just get things done around the house. It's a nice little video. I personally love them, watch them all the time. We'll say this was a month where I read a little bit too much, and that's a little bit too much on my standards. I said that this year I wanted to take it slow, I wanted to enjoy what I was reading, take my time with it, not rush with the books, and something about the escapism train, listen, something about that damn train grabbed me in October, pulled me, strapped me in, ran with me, ran me over, because I read quite a bit in comparison to other months, and I never want to do it again. As October ended, I felt slumpy. What is that feeling so sudden and new? Anyways, you get it. I didn't really like the feeling of a reading slump because it's about the first time I've strongly felt that this year, and I didn't like it. And so I think I'm sticking to like my 5 to 7 books in a given month and having fun, having a good time. But this amount of books, I think I read like 12 books, which is not outrageous, but no, it's just simply not sustainable. Leave me with my small amount of books a month. I think with that, I'm good. That to say, we have a long array of books, long, short, different genres, which I think is gonna be fun. And do let a girl know down in the comments what you guys read in the month of October, because I like to snoop. I'm just saying, if you want to leave it, if you want to let me know, do let a girl know. And we're starting out good friends with Legendary by Stephanie Garber. I think you guys must be tired by now because I feel like in every single video I put up, there is something Stephanie Garber mentioned, and it must be overwhelming, and I'm so sorry if it is. But I did read Legendary, which is the second book in the Caraval trilogy, and it is simply so good. I enjoyed this way more than I did the first book, and I think it not only has to do with the fact that we do follow Donatella in this one. I thought it was super exciting, super engaging, the stakes were super high. Let me give you a rundown. In the Caraval series, we follow the Dragna sisters, Scarlet and Donatella. In the first book, we follow Scarlet, in the second one, we follow Donatella, and basically the premise of this is that every once in a while, a magical contest like no other is hosted by one legend. It is called Caraval, and it is a several night event where people will be able to witness magic in a set of riddles, puzzles like never seen before. And Scarlet, the main character of book 1, is absolutely obsessed with the idea of attending, except that invitations are not really handed out to everyone. It's a very exclusive thing. Donatella manages to get her there. Donatella gets lost in the process, and then Miss Scarlet has to find Donatella in the first book, and that is basically her prize if she wins Caraval. And I absolutely love Stephanie Garber's writing style because it is so whimsy, it's so lyrical, but in the right spots. It's not overwhelming because I find that certain purple prose, you get into the book and you're like, okay, you're just saying words at this point. It just sounds like gibberish. I think Stephanie Garber has found a really great medium of having pretty normal prose, and then when it meets the strike, we get just a little bit of purple prose, and it's so, so good. I was pleasantly surprised with this one in particular because I found that not only did the writing get better, but I found that the stakes were higher. The romance in this one felt a whole lot better than in book 1. The connection between Scarlet and Julian is not my favorite. I feel like it's very surface level so far. And while yes, we can argue the same for Donatella and Dante, I think chemistry-wise, it's just so much better. Their angst, their banter, their dynamic is just so phenomenal. And Donatella really is that vessel for the world building, for the discovery, because Donatella offers a lot more information than Scarlet ever did in the first book. And in this one, we really get into the nitty-gritty of the world, the deities that rule it, that are no longer present, and how they are attempting to make their way back into the world, and exactly how certain certain magical items work, and I think this book in particular, and I will assume finale, really sets up the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy so well, because it gives you a perfect ground to be on before you even get into the Once Upon a Broken Heart series. And so I personally loved this. I thought it was really fun. 5 stars. 5 stars to Miss Garber. And while we're on the subject of Miss Garber, I did read the third and last book of the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy, which is A Curse for True Love. And I have to say, friends, I did vlog the experience. That vlog is gonna come a little bit later on because there are other books being read for the vlog, and it's not quite ready yet. But just to wrap this up, because I also read it as soon as it came out, finished it within 12 hours of starting it, it was sort of underwhelming. So the premise for this one is that we follow Evangeline Fox, who is absolutely in love with fairy tales. Her mother really fostered that love and that hope and that appreciation for them, and her getting her own happy ending. And something terrible happens that her loved one, her significant other, ends up engaged and about to marry somebody else. And so to get him out of that pickle, she makes a deal with our favorite fates, Jax. And in order to strike that deal, he requests 3 kisses back in order to concede. And those 3 kisses are for magical purposes, and we go from there. The first book was really just set up. The second book, we get into a lot of the nitty-gritty of the plot and exactly what Jax is seeking and exactly why Evangeline is like so important. And then in the third one, obviously we get the resolution for all of those bits and pieces that showed up throughout the series. And the biggest thing, the biggest plot twist really, is what happened at the end of book 2. That is a big chunk of what needs to be resolved in book 3. However, even though that part to me was satisfactory, like I really enjoyed how the end of book 2 developed into this one, just know it's one of those tropes I absolutely hate, and I didn't hate it this time. Like, I actually really enjoyed the way Stephanie Garber carried it out, and so I have got no qualms with that. I think where my personal qualms comes with this book is that it is simply too short to feel as tense as it should have. To be the finale of a trilogy that seemingly had so many stakes at the end of book 2, I think the stakes to me personally and that tension that I so felt at the end of book 2 were completely absent from this one. Everything was sort of resolved so quickly. The menacing character of Apollo didn't feel as menacing as I think he was attempting to be, or that the author wanted him to be. And then the very end of the book was super underwhelming, and I didn't really love the way that it wrapped up. Like, I knew that's where we were gonna end up. I think just writing wise, it just kind of fell apart for me, and the ending was so rushed that I virtually had like no time to kind of feel anything towards it. I think I did end up giving this 4 stars just because it was good, but it really could have been a better wrap up for a series. The Mindfuck series by S.T. Abbey was read in the month of October. The entirety of it, by the way, I didn't just read 1, I didn't just read 2 or 3, I read all 5 of them, right? I think it's 5 books, yes. I read all 5 of them, and honestly, book 1 was a little silly goofy, but after that, why was it like really good? I wasn't expecting to enjoy this, I think, nearly as much as I did. I did rate every single book individually on Goodreads because I was going to count every single book individually. Why wouldn't I? All that to say though, if I had to rate the entire bind up, I think I'd give it like a solid 4.5 as a premise. Bear with me. And follow Lana, who is a serial killer, hell-bent on revenge based on something that happened in her childhood to her, her brother, and her father. And she has a sidekick. They very much have the dynamic of Emily and Nolan from Revenge, if you know what I mean. He's like the tech mastermind, and one day by chance she ends up meeting Logan, who is not only an FBI agent, but the FBI agent who is investigating her exact case, and they end up falling in love, and it goes from there. And I think the reason why I really enjoyed this was not only because parts of it reminded me of Revenge, but also because I loved the K-drama Flower of Evil, which is the exact same premise, where the main character is a detective investigating a serial killing case, and the main suspect is her husband, or her husband is committing the murders, and she doesn't know. Except that this one's like flipped gender-wise, and I absolutely absolutely loved this because not only do we get to see other cases as he is investigating hers, but we see Lana have such good growth, which is why the ending of this book kind of pissed me a little, like I'm not gonna lie. The very last one, I was like, that was unnecessary. We did not need to do that. But aside from that, her growth really is good. We go from seeing someone who is super closed off, is not willing to connect with other people, is not willing to set aside this plot for revenge, and the more that she falls in love with Logan and introduces people into her life that love her, appreciate her, kind of know her and see her for exactly who and what she is, whether it's like her as a person or actual criminality of it all, she opens up and she makes really good connections, and it's so amazing to see in like a really weird way. And I love that the basis for the murders actually makes sense, because I've read other books with like killer heroines that are supposed to be justified and it's supposed to be like this go girl kind of thing, like I support women's rights and women's wrongs, but it didn't feel like this. And the more that you read like the little novellas, the better it gets, and I'm genuinely saying that. Just bear with the first one if you do read this, but after the first one, it's kind of really good. And just read the trigger warnings because there's a plenty for this one. The themes that it touches on not only are very graphic, but they're also graphically on page. And so if you're not into all of that, don't get into this book because it's a strong one. Villains Are Destined to Die Volume 3 was also read in the month of October. It feels like I read this a millennia ago, but it was just a month ago, friends. And I think I gave this like a 3 or a 4 star if I'm not mistaken. In this one, we follow a main character who, after playing the most famous game around town at the moment of the manhwa, falls asleep and wakes up inside the game. She is playing in hard mode as Penelope Eckhart, and the catch is that if you play in hard mode, it is super hard to earn affection points, which is the whole point of the game, to win. And in fact, this specific character loses them fairly quickly and then gets killed by all of the love interests, which are also aplenty. And the whole purpose of hard mode is to win before the actual Duke's heiress comes back, because she is lost, and this one's like a changeling kind of stand-in situation. And so the main character, because she's already played the game, kind of knows how to navigate things and how to address certain characters or not in order to keep herself alive. And I love every single second of that. And I've loved volumes 1 and 2 a lot. I think the way that the story is progressing and the parallels between this game character and our main character in real life, I think the parallels being drawn are so phenomenal. And we get to, I think, understand exactly why our main character is inside the game playing as this particular character, because the similarities are not only astounding, but also through those, she is able to empathize with Penelope in a way that other people cannot in this world. And so seemingly nobody understands this game character better than the main character, which I think is super cool. And I don't know exactly where it's going or where we're going to end up, if she's actually going to stay in this world, if she's going to go back to real life. What I do know though is that I can't wait to read more. But my gripe with this particular volume was that it was more of the same, because we kind of bounce back and forth with, I have to gain affection points and now I'm losing them, and I have to interact with certain love interests. It does get a little bit repetitive, specifically because 2 of the love interests are the Duke's sons, and we see them honestly primarily as the love interest, even though I'm not rooting for either of them because it goes from worse to worser. It's just so bad. And we see them very, very closely in this one, and I didn't really love it because, again, it's more of the same. It's that tug of war we've seen for 2 volumes, and so I'm hoping the next volume does a little bit something more. I've seen a lot of people root for Callisto, which is technically like the bad guy, but also the guy that seemingly is the best for her according to the fandom, and so I can't wait to see where that goes, hopefully in volume 4. I don't know, people are reading this in Webtoon, so I'm sure people are further ahead than volume 4, but I can't wait to see what that's about because I'm curious. Next up, we have got Mort by Terry Pratchett, which was my very first Discworld book. Terry Pratchett book. I did it, friends. We read the very first one. Never thought I'd read anything Discworld related, but we have made our way there. In this one, we follow our main character, Mort, who by all intents and purposes is considered useless by everybody around him, by his family, by the people in town. Nobody wants him to collaborate on anything, to touch anything, to be around anything or anyone, because they kind of know that he is going to make a mess out of it. And one day he goes to a job fair. He is the last one there. Everybody has gotten a job opportunity except for him. And suddenly Death just arrives. Death is like, hey, do you want a job? And Mort's like, hell yeah, let's go. And so he leaves with Death as Death's apprentice, and he will learn all of the ropes and exactly what Death's purpose within the Discworld is, because it's not necessarily killing, but it's rather assuring that people stay dead or are dead so that they can kind of pass through to whatever's next. I really loved Mort's character growth because we start out with someone who, again, by all intents and purposes, people don't really think he's helpful, and he also kind of thinks that of himself, and he's not very confident, doesn't have a lot of self-love or, again, confidence for that matter. And the more we go into the story, you see him kind of come to his own, which is really, really good, and you see him become more assured, more willing to speak up for himself and step up to the plate, not necessarily because he wholly wants that, but really because he knows it's the right thing to do. And so we see him being unafraid of responsibilities and, again, doing the right thing, which is incredible. On the flip side, as he is learning the ropes of Death, Death is trying to find the meaning of humanity, which was a really beautiful thing to witness in ways. He wants to get drunk and to go out partying and experience human connections and friendships and late night chats as you are at a bar, and it was so lovely and, again, humane to see him go through that experience, trying to understand exactly what makes us us and who we are, and why human interaction between ourselves is so important. And we kind of also see him feel appreciated for the first time. He is asked questions that he has never been asked before, and he feels really good about that. And I think it sort of showcases the beauty in the small little things, again, in that connectivity, which was absolutely incredible to see. The relationship between the two of them, interestingly enough, Death doesn't have a lot of patience for a lot of people, and Mort is one of those people that is immensely curious. He is asking questions. He is always kind of wanting to be in the know, and so he asks questions about the tiniest of things. And Death, although annoyed, is very reciprocal in allowing Mort to get those answers because he does want him to learn, and he also appreciates that curiosity despite being a bit annoyed by it. And so I think their banter and their interactions, particularly in the first third of the book, I thought were absolutely phenomenal. The ending of the book was also really, really good. The only bit of the book I did not enjoy so much was the middle of it, which was interesting because it's such a short book, as you can see. And so had the middle of the book not been as sluggish for me personally, just because I wasn't really interested in the whole princess plot and the assassination and all of that stuff, and then the wizardry towards the end, I really didn't care a whole lot about that. I really was just here for Death and Mort and Isabel, and I was just there for them. I wanted kind of that coziness of them, and then Mort and Death trying to figure out what this apprenticeship means, because it's the first time Death has done this ever. And so I kind of wanted a bit more of that, but it is what it is. Gave it 4 stars. It was still great, and, you know, hopefully the audiobooks from now on will be a fun experience. Then She Was Gone by Liz Jewell was a disappointment, I'm not gonna lie. 3 stars to this one because I wanted this to be so good, and yet it ended up being underwhelming, which honestly is the exact reason why I don't tend to read thrillers, because it's either one of 2 things and it doesn't end up being the third where everything's kind of well-rounded. I don't find a lot of those. So if you have like some really good thriller recommendations, do let a girl know. But I find that thrillers either have a really good setup, like the entire book is so good, you get to the ending fucks it up, or you have a really bad setup and you have the best twist of all time. And so neither thing really matches up. I don't want just one or the other. I don't want to compromise. I want the whole thing. I want the entire experience. And so in this one, we follow Laurel Mack after the disappearance of her daughter Ellie. Her daughter went missing several years ago. I think a decade ago, actually. Yeah, it's been 10 years. And so Ellie goes missing and her case goes cold. Like, we never really resolved this. We never really know what has happened to her. And for years and years, Laurel has lived with a guilty conscience that her golden daughter, her favorite daughter, never really found closure or peace or anything of the sort. And so there's this unfinished business that is plaguing Laurel's character, hence why she is not able to do many things throughout the book, assumingly. And present time, she ends up meeting this guy who she thinks is super cute, super handsome, and they start dating. She meets his daughters, and one of them looks an awful lot like Ellie. And so we need to figure out exactly why that is, who this lady is, who this guy is, and exactly why we're in this situation in the first place. Well, I do think that this book had potential in some aspects, also known as Noelle's interludes, POV. I found her second person perspective to be so very interesting and super immersive for the plot. I really enjoyed Noelle's chapters, and also kind of slightly touching on the unspoken sides of motherhood, where sometimes a connection with a kid is not the same as the next one. Sometimes there is a bit of favoritism. Sometimes there is a golden favorite child, and not a lot of people would like to admit that. Sometimes a mother wants her life too, and she doesn't necessarily want to focus entirely on the kids after they are fully grown. And I think that while a lot of those things are taboo and a lot of those things can be perceived as incorrect, I do think there may be ways to go about them that are not necessarily harmful. I think it dips its toes a little bit into that conversation, but then backtracks a lot, so you don't really get the full extent of it, which was disappointing. And more than anything, aside from the plot twist being extremely obvious, like, this book gives absolutely no credit to the reader. I thought, based on what people had said, that this was going to have like the best plot twist of all time. It's really, really basic. Exactly what you think it is. Like, it's probably going to be that, because there's not a whole lot of options just based on the reading experience. And so, aside from the plot being obvious, which I don't really tend to judge books too much for it, because it's just kind of what it is. It also depends from reader to reader. What may be obvious to me is not obvious to the next reader, and vice versa. But aside from that, the book ends on this note that is super preppy, super positive. A lot of things have changed ever since we kind of wrapped up and figured out what really happened to Ellie 10 years ago. And yet, one of the biggest things that bugged me about this book is that we clearly see Laurel have a favorite. We clearly see Laurel neglect her other kids. We clearly see her not have a great relationship with neither her daughter or son, which are both still alive. And then at the end of the book, we just magically need to accept that everything's great. The progress has been amazing. She did the work, girl slay. She foreclosed everything that needed. I did not believe that progress, like, at all. I was just completely bugged by the fact that we're just meant to embrace that everything ended on such a happy, positive note. No. Next up, we have got Family Lore by Elizabeth Acevedo, which I listened to as an audio, and it was the best experience as always, because Elizabeth Acevedo does narrate the book alongside two other narrators, so it is a full cast of characters, which is really, really exciting. And in this one, we have got, yes, a bit of an Encanto-ish situation, but not exactly like it. We have a multi-generational story following the Marte women who all have different abilities. Some of them are able to predict when people are going to die. Some of them have a really great ability with plants. Some of them have really great abilities with cooking. Some of them are really akin to people's truths and their lies. And I love that more than them having powers, it's really a huge play into all of the Latin superstitions that reside within my culture of women being very intuitive. Our food speaks, of people who can tell these different premonitions and who do dream of things. I love how it's just a play on small things that can be turned into somewhat magical, because we already believe that those things are slightly magical. And in particular, the setup of the book is that one of the Marte sisters, the elder ones, Flor, who has the ability to dream of when people may be possibly dying, basically tells her family that she is going to host a living wake for herself. Except that everybody starts freaking out because nobody really knows whether she's hosting this because she has seen herself die, if she has had a premonition, or if she's just doing this for the shits and the giggles. And I think that that specific setup in that premise was such a great vessel to explain exactly how all of these women are interconnected with each other, exactly how women have to carry the emotional burden of other women because we are willing to do so, because we have to, because otherwise other people will not in our lives, and how that makes us who we are and dictates the way that we interact with each other. It was just an absolutely beautiful look into Latin culture, into, again, womanhood and all of the things that it's comprised surprised of. And it also is sprinkled with loads of commentary, not only on colonialism and religion, and how both of those things can also dictate the decisions that you make throughout your life or the way that you are raised, and how a lot of traumas and fears and doubts can be passed down generationally because of it. But we also see loads of commentary through my favorite POV, which is Ona's, of sexuality and confidence and exploring your body, which may or may not be spoken of in your household depending on your parent. And although some people may not have a mother to talk about those things with, you do have other women in your life that may be willing to pick up that conversation with you and talk about those things. And so I think it was a really well-rounded story. There were bits and pieces that I wasn't fully convinced by, particularly some of those historical interjections that the book does have, because they do feel a bit out of place. But I personally ended up really loving this because it's super slice of life. You get to see all of these women super, super closely, and you get to understand who they are and why they behave, interact, and carry themselves in the way that they do. And it was just a really beautiful, I guess in a way, character family study. Did I even mention my rating for this one? It's like a 4.5. It was really good. And then last but not least, we have got Powerless by Elsie Silver, which I was pleasantly surprised by. If you watched my TBR video, then you know I got a friend's pick, and Miss Liv picked this out for me. And I was a bit on the fence. At first, I even thought she had recommended Powerless. I think it's by Laura Roberts, the one where she wrote the entire book and shared it with the world on TikTok and shared all of her progress and journey with it. I thought that's the one she was talking about. No, it turns out she was talking about cowboys. Well, ish, I guess. Ranchers? Is that what you'd call them? I'm not really sure. However, it was really, really good. In this one, we followed Jasper and Sloane, who are a very particular duo. Sloane is a ballerina and Jasper is a hockey player, and they have been friends forever. Jasper is like the honorary family member that they took in when he was very young, and they struck up a friendship. Kind of reminds me of Catherine and Heathcliff without all of the toxicity and all of the weird bits. And so these two grew up very tight, very close, and although they have loved each other for years and years, they have neglected those feelings for each other for also years and years. And so when Sloane's would-be wedding goes to absolute fucking shit, Jasper basically proposes to get her out of there, go on a road trip together, and on the way they figure out their feelings for each other, and it goes from there. I absolutely loved their connection. I love when best friends to lovers is done well, and when the characters are very decisive on what they want, who they want, how they want things to go, and exactly what they expect from each other. And this one just laid the groundwork super, super nicely. And so their connection right from the get-go was amazing. The chemistry, the tension, the banter, the absolute angst of it all was absolutely perfect. And I also love the way that Elsie Silver sneaks in mental health into this book. Jasper in particular has anxiety, and a lot of anticipatory anxiety, which as a generalized anxiety who also suffers from a lot of anticipatory, I felt his character so much. There is so much doubt in him for romance, not only with Sloane, which obviously does exacerbate that feeling for him, but I think more than anything, it's that fear of not knowing how the other person's feeling, not knowing how they're going to react, not knowing whether they're going to leave you, not knowing whether you're worthy for them, not knowing whether they're worthy for you, and just having so much doubt in the way that they carry themselves in the relationship, and doubting their interactions, and did I say the wrong thing or the right thing? And he's always kind of thinking about the worst case scenario, which broke my heart at times, but it's such a, I think, an accurate depiction of the way that I've experienced relationships or dating or interpersonal relationships in general. And so I think the way that Elsie Silver handled that was super, super good. Some things in here were just pretty much on the dot for me, and so I loved the fact that we did get the mention of mental illness, mental health in this one, and exactly how the character navigates that, and exactly how, you know, he partners up with someone who basically pushes him to be more communicative and vice versa. I think the more that the book goes along, these two really push for honest communication, for straightforward communication. If you're feeling something, tell me. I don't want you to sit on it. Because honestly, from experience, I think that when you do have loads of anticipatory anxiety, or you have a lot of anxiety in interpersonal relationships, you do have a huge responsibility to be very vocal in the way that you're feeling. And although it can be extremely intimidating, it is necessary, because otherwise the brain just keeps on going. And so I love how there were several times where Sloane kind of just heart stops him, and again vice versa, in that, hey, like, that's not real, like what you're thinking of is not real. Also, the smut in this one is some of the best smut what I have read in a romance book, it is simply too good to be true. God, I see what you do for others and I'm waiting for you to do that for me too. It was so good. I gave this 5 stars. It was an honest surprise and I can't wait to dive deeper into the series. I ordered Heartless and Hopeless, hoping that I enjoy those nearly as much, if not as much or more than I did this one. Actually, did I give this 5 stars or did I give this a 4.5? Either way, it's there and that's just, it's where we are at. Yes. So there's that, friends. These are all of the books that I read in the month of October. Honestly, it was a good month. I've had better ones, but I'd still call this an absolute win in my books. So do let a girl know down below what you read in the month of October. What did you rate them? Let a girl know all of that down below. Also, if you want to let me know what you're currently reading, do let a girl know as well. I'm currently reading Check and May. It may be one of the best books I've read this year. But yeah, if you liked the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up down below. Subscribe if you haven't done so already for more bookish content like this. If you want to support the channel further, I do have a Patreon. It's always linked down below alongside all of my socials. And if you reach the end of the video, let us leave a horse emoji down below in honor of Mort. Love you all so much, and I shall see you in the next one.